Get your kid out of here! The voice was so harsh, so filled with anger, that every child on the playground froze mid-swing, mid-run, mid-laughter. But Mert remained still in his wheelchair. Tears filled his young eyes, yet he did not cry. Only 8 years old, he simply wanted what every child wanted, to play freely, to laugh without fear. No one noticed at first, but in one of the black cars quietly parked around the park, a hand reached for a radio. Intervention required. The voice crackled through, calm but urgent. And just like that, the ordinary afternoon shattered into something extraordinary. In the moments that followed, what seemed like a simple playground scolding would set in motion a chain of events that no one, least of all Mert, could have predicted. The morning sun cast long shadows across Riverside Community Park, where the sound of children's laughter usually filled the air like music. But today something was different. Today, for the first time in 3 months, little Mert Demir was going to try playing with other children again. Mert sat quietly in his specialized wheelchair, watching from the park's entrance as kids ran back and forth across the playground. His small hands gripped the wheels nervously. The accident that took his ability to walk was still fresh in everyone's memory. A drunk driver, a family car, and a life changed forever. But Mert's spirit hadn't been broken. Not yet. His mother, Aisha, pushed him gently toward the playground area. "Are you sure you're ready for this, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice carrying the weight of a mother's protective love mixed with worry. Mert nodded firmly. "I want to play, Mom. I miss playing." What neither of them noticed was the black SUV parked across the street, its windows tinted dark. Inside, a man in civilian clothes watched through binoculars, speaking quietly into a secure radio. "Target in sight. Beginning observation." This wasn't surveillance in the way most people would think. This was protection. Because Mert Demir wasn't just any 8-year-old boy. His father, Staff Sergeant Kamal Demir, was currently deployed in a classified mission overseas. And the promise made to every soldier was simple. While you protect your country, we protect your family. Captain Riley Matthews had made that promise personally. He'd served with Kamal in 2 tours, had carried wounded soldiers beside him, had trusted him with his life more times than he could count. When Kamal's son was paralyzed and Kamal couldn't come home, Riley made a vow. Nothing would harm that boy. Nothing. As Mert's wheelchair approached the playground, the other children began to stare. Some whispered. Others pointed. A few ran to tell their parents, who looked over with expressions ranging from pity to discomfort. "Look, it's the wheelchair boy," said a 10-year-old named Jake, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "My mom said he got hit by a car." Mert's cheeks flushed red, but he kept moving forward. He had practiced this moment with his physical therapist. He knew what to say. "Hi, I'm Mert. Can I play with you?" The silence that followed was deafening. Jake stepped forward, crossing his arms. "How are you going to play? You can't even walk." "I can do lots of things," Mert replied, his voice small but determined. "I can play catch. I can do puzzles. I can—" "But you can't run," interrupted another child, an 11-year-old girl named Sarah. "Our games need running. You'll just slow us down." From the black SUV, Captain Matthews watched his hands tightening on the radio. His team of 4 specialists sat in 2 other vehicles, all former special forces, all personally invested in keeping this family safe. But their orders were clear: observe and protect, intervene only if physical threat is imminent. This wasn't physical. This was something else, something that could hurt just as much. Mert tried to join a group playing with a soccer ball. They kicked it just out of his reach, laughing when he struggled to maneuver his wheelchair to get it. "Oops," Jake said with a smirk. "Guess you're not fast enough." Aisha, who had been sitting on a nearby bench, stood up. Her maternal instincts were screaming at her to intervene, but Mert had asked for independence. He wanted to handle this himself. She watched with a breaking heart as her son tried again and again to find a group that would include him. "Maybe try the sandbox," suggested one mother, trying to be helpful but not understanding. That might be easier for him. Mert looked at the sandbox where toddlers played. He was 8 years old, not 3. The suggestion stung worse than outright rejection. That's when Marcus, a 12-year-old who had been watching from the monkey bars, walked over. Marcus was bigger than the other kids, clearly the informal leader of the playground social hierarchy. Hey, wheelchair boy, Marcus called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. This is our playground. We don't need you here making everything weird. Mert's lip trembled, but he straightened his shoulders. My name is Mert, and this is a public playground. I can play here too. Marcus laughed, a sound devoid of kindness. Public doesn't mean for broken kids. You make everyone uncomfortable. Look around. Nobody wants to play with you. It was true. The other children had formed a loose circle, watching like spectators at a cruel show. Some looked uncomfortable, but none spoke up. None defended him. The adults nearby had noticed the commotion, but seemed unsure whether to intervene in children's business. I'm not broken, Mert whispered, but his voice cracked. Yeah? Prove it. Get out of that chair and play with us. The playground went silent. Even the toddlers in the sandbox seemed to sense the tension. Mert's eyes filled with tears, but he refused to let them fall. I can't get out of my chair, but that doesn't mean I can't play. That doesn't mean I don't belong. It means exactly that, Marcus said coldly. This is for normal kids. You're not normal. From across the street, Captain Matthews spoke into his radio. I can't watch this anymore. We're moving in. Sir, orders are observation only unless physical. Those orders just changed, Matthews interrupted. Nobody talks to Kamal's boy like that. Nobody. Aisha couldn't stand it any longer. She marched toward the group, her face flushed with anger. That's enough, she called out. But Marcus wasn't finished. As she approached, he looked directly at her and said the words that would change everything. Lady, get your kid out of here. He doesn't belong with normal children. Take him somewhere else where broken kids play. The playground fell completely silent. Parents stopped their conversations. Even the birds seemed to pause their chirping. Aisha's face went pale, then red with fury. But before she could respond, she heard the sound of car doors slamming. Multiple car doors. From 3 different positions around the park, men began walking toward the playground. They weren't in uniform, but everything about their movement screamed military. Purposeful, coordinated, serious. Captain Matthews reached the playground first. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with graying temples and eyes that had seen combat. He walked directly to where Marcus stood, stopping just close enough to be imposing without being threatening. Excuse me, son, he said, his voice calm, but carrying authority that made everyone freeze. Did I just hear you tell this family to leave? Marcus, suddenly not feeling so confident, took a step back. We were just playing. Playing? Matthews looked around at the circle of children, then at Mert sitting alone in his wheelchair. This looks like bullying to me. One of the other operators, Sergeant Torres, had positioned himself near the parents who were watching. His presence alone made them uncomfortable, not because he was threatening, but because he clearly wasn't someone to be trifled with. The third operator, Lieutenant Kim, stood near Aisha, offering her a respectful nod. Ma'am, he said quietly, is your son okay? Aisha was confused but grateful. Who are you people? Matthews answered without taking his eyes off Marcus. We're friends of Mert's father. We promised him we'd look after his family while he's away serving our country. Serving our country? One of the parents asked, suddenly interested. Staff Sergeant Kamal Demir, Matthews announced loud enough for everyone to hear. Currently deployed on active duty. This is his son, Mert. Mert was paralyzed 3 months ago when a drunk driver hit his family's car while they were coming home from a school event. The information hit the gathered crowd like a physical blow. This wasn't just any child they were watching get bullied. This was a soldier's son, a child who had already sacrificed more than most adults ever would. Matthews knelt down to Mert's level, his voice gentle now. Hey there, soldier. I'm Captain Matthews. I served with your dad. He talks about you all the time. Mert's eyes widened. You know my daddy? I do, and he asked me to tell you something. Matthews reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flag pin. He said to remember that heroes come in all shapes and sizes. Some heroes walk, some heroes roll, but all heroes have courage. And you, son, are the bravest hero I know. Mert took the pin with trembling hands. Really? Really? Your dad is proud of you every single day, and so are we. Matthews stood and turned back to the group of children and parents. His voice carried across the playground like a military briefing. This boy's father is currently risking his life overseas to protect the freedom that allows you to bring your children to this park safely. While he's gone, his son recovers from an injury that would break most grown men. And instead of supporting this family, you choose to exclude and humiliate them. The silence was profound. Let me be very clear, Matthews continued. Mert Demir has every right to play in this park. More right than most, considering what his family has sacrificed for this country. And if anyone has a problem with that, they can discuss it with me. Marcus, who had started this entire confrontation, now looked like he wanted to disappear into the ground. I'm sorry, he mumbled. You're not apologizing to me, son, Matthews said firmly. You're apologizing to Mert. Marcus shuffled over to the wheelchair, his head down. I'm sorry, Mert. I was wrong. But Matthews wasn't finished. He addressed the entire playground. This boy doesn't need your pity. He needs your respect. He doesn't need to be treated differently because he's in a wheelchair. He needs to be treated like any other child, with kindness and inclusion. Can you do that? Slowly, heads began to nod. Sarah, the 11-year-old who had earlier said Mert couldn't play their games, stepped forward. Mert, would you like to play a game with us? We could play something sitting down. Jake, looking ashamed of his earlier behavior, added, Yeah, we could play categories or something. You're probably smarter than us anyway. Mert looked up at his mother, then at Captain Matthews, then at the children who were suddenly looking at him with new eyes. I'd like that, he said softly. As the children began organizing a new game that everyone could play, Matthews walked over to Aisha. Mrs. Demir, I want you to have my card. If anything like this ever happens again, you call me immediately. Aisha took the card with shaking hands. I don't understand. Why are you here? Your husband saved my life in Afghanistan. He carried me 2 miles through enemy territory when I was wounded. I made him a promise that while he protects our country, I protect his family. That includes making sure his son can play in a park without being bullied. Tears streamed down Aisha's face. Thank you, she whispered. No, ma'am, thank you. Thank you for raising a son as brave as his father. As the operators prepared to leave, maintaining their watchful distance, something beautiful began to happen. The children, having seen Mert as a real person with a real story, began including him naturally in their play. They discovered he was funny, smart, and had an infectious laugh. One child asked about his wheelchair, but not in a mocking way, with genuine curiosity. Mert explained how it worked, even let some of them try pushing it, empty, of course, to understand how it moved. By the end of the afternoon, Mert had been invited to 3 different birthday parties and had made plans for a play date. As they prepared to leave the park, Mert looked up at his mother. Mom, can we come back tomorrow? Aisha smiled, tears of joy replacing tears of pain. Of course, sweetheart. From the black SUV, Captain Matthews watched them go. His radio crackled. Mission accomplished? Matthews smiled. Mission accomplished. One soldier's son is playing in a park again. Kamal's going to be proud. Sir, incoming message from Staff Sergeant Demir. Matthews took the radio. Kamal's voice came through, crackled but clear from thousands of miles away. Thank you, was all he said. No thanks needed, brother. Your boy is safe. Your boy is playing. Your boy is exactly who you raised him to be. As the weeks passed, word of what happened at Riverside Park spread throughout the community, but not in the way Aisha expected. Instead of gossip or pity, she began receiving phone calls from other parents. My daughter told me about Mert, said Mrs. Johnson, whose daughter Emma was in Mert's class. She wants to have him over for a play date. Would that be okay? More calls followed. Birthday party invitations, study group requests. Slowly, Aisha realized that Captain Matthews' intervention had done more than stop one incident of bullying. It had opened hearts and minds throughout their small community. But the real change was happening in Mert himself. The boy who had once been afraid to leave his house was now eager to go to school, to the park, to anywhere children gathered. His confidence grew daily, and with it, his natural leadership qualities began to shine. 1 month after the playground incident, Mert's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, noticed something remarkable during recess. Instead of standing on the sidelines supervising games she couldn't physically join, Mert had become the unofficial game coordinator. He would suggest modifications to traditional playground games that made them inclusive for everyone. Let's play freeze dance, but when you freeze, you have to help someone else freeze in a creative way, he would suggest. Or, what if we play soccer, but everyone has to stay in their assigned spots like they're glued there? The games became more creative, more collaborative, and more fun for everyone involved. Mrs. Rodriguez called Aisha one afternoon. "Mrs. Demir, I need to tell you something. Your son has transformed our playground dynamics. He's not just participating, he's leading. The other children look to him for ideas, and he's teaching them that limitations can spark creativity." That evening, as Aisha helped Mert with his homework, she asked him about it. "The kids used to feel sorry for me," Mert explained, not looking up from his math worksheets. "But now they think I'm smart because I figure out different ways to play. Sarah said I'm like a game inventor." Aisha smiled, remembering the same Sarah who had once told Mert he was too slow for their games. 2 months later, something unprecedented happened. The school principal, Mr. Davidson, called Aisha with an unusual request. "Mrs. Demir, we're having our annual school assembly about kindness and inclusion next week. The student council has made a unanimous request. They want Mert to be one of the speakers." "Speakers?" Aisha was surprised. "But he's only 8 years old." "Sometimes 8-year-olds have the most important things to say," Mr. Davidson replied. "The students chose him, not the adults. They want him to talk about friendship and inclusion from his perspective." On the day of the assembly, the entire elementary school gathered in the gymnasium. Mert sat on the stage in his wheelchair, looking out at 400 faces, some familiar, some not. His heart was racing, but his mother's encouraging smile from the audience gave him strength. When the microphone was passed to him, Mert cleared his throat and began to speak in his clear, 8-year-old voice. "Hi, everyone. My name is Mert, and I want to tell you about being different." The gymnasium fell silent. "When I first came to this school, I was scared. I thought being in a wheelchair made me weird. Some kids stared at me. Some kids avoided me. Some kids were mean to me." He paused, looking around the room. But then something happened. Some grown-ups helped me, and some kids decided to be brave. They decided to get to know me instead of just looking at my wheelchair. A few heads nodded in the audience. "I learned something important. Everyone is different in some way. Tommy wears glasses. Sarah has red hair. Jake is really tall. Emma is really good at math but can't draw very well. I use a wheelchair." He smiled now, gaining confidence. But being different isn't bad. It's actually cool. Because when we're all different, we can help each other with different things. I can't run fast, but I'm really good at solving problems. Emma can't draw, but she helps me with math. Jake can reach tall things for everyone. Mrs. Rodriguez, watching from the side of the gymnasium, felt tears welling up in her eyes. "The best part is," Mert continued, "when we all play together, nobody is left out. Everyone gets to use what makes them special to help the group." He looked directly at Marcus, who was sitting in the third row. The boy who had once told him he didn't belong now gave him a thumbs up. "So I want to ask everyone to try something. When you see someone who looks different from you, don't stare. Don't avoid them. Just say hi, ask their name, find out what makes them special, because I promise you, everyone has something special about them." The applause started slowly, then built until the entire gymnasium was on its feet. But the most meaningful response came from a kindergartner in the front row who raised her hand. "Yes?" Mert said, smiling at her. "Mert, can you come play with us at recess? We're making up a new game, and we need someone smart to help us figure out the rules." Mert's face lit up. "I'd love to." After the assembly, as families were filing out, Captain Matthews appeared at Aisha's side. She hadn't seen him since that day at the park, but he had clearly been in the audience. "Ma'am," he said respectfully, "I wanted you to know I spoke with your husband yesterday." Aisha's eyes widened. "You did?" "Yes, I told him about today, about the speech his son gave, about how proud this community is of him." Matthews handed her a folded piece of paper. "This is from Staff Sergeant Demir." With shaking hands, Aisha unfolded the paper. In her husband's familiar handwriting, she read, "My dearest Mert, Captain Matthews told me you gave a speech to your whole school. I wish I could have been there to see it. I am so proud of you, not because you're brave despite being in a wheelchair, but because you're brave, period. You're teaching other kids what I learned in the military, that we're stronger when we work together, and that real strength comes from lifting others up. Keep being the leader I know you are. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Daddy. Aisha wiped away tears as Mert read the letter, his own eyes shining with joy. Mom, he said quietly, do you think Daddy would be proud that I'm not scared anymore? Before Aisha could answer, Captain Matthews knelt down to Mert's level. Son, your father is proud of you every single day. But today you made him the proudest dad in the whole world. 3 weeks later, Mert Demir was elected class representative for his second grade class. Not because he was in a wheelchair, not because the teachers felt sorry for him, but because his classmates had learned what Captain Matthews already knew. Heroes really do come in all shapes and sizes, and sometimes they roll. 6 months after that day at the playground, Riverside Community Park held its first annual Inclusion Day. The event was Mert's idea, proposed during a city council meeting that he attended with his mother. The day featured adaptive sports, wheelchair basketball demonstrations, and inclusive games designed by local children. The keynote speaker was an 8-year-old boy in a wheelchair who taught an entire community that different doesn't mean less than. Staff Sergeant Kamal Demir was granted emergency leave to attend. When he stepped off the plane at the local airport, the first thing he saw was his son rolling his wheelchair toward him at full speed, arms outstretched, face beaming with joy. Daddy, I have so much to tell you. As Kamal lifted his son from the wheelchair into his arms, Captain Matthews watched from a respectful distance, knowing that his promise had been kept. The soldier's family was safe. The soldier's son was thriving, and in a small community park where differences were once met with cruelty, children now played together, learned together, and grew together. Because sometimes it takes a village to raise a child, and sometimes it takes one child to change a village. In a world that often seems divided by differences, this story reminds us that compassion can bridge any gap. It shows us that standing up for others doesn't require a uniform or special training. It just requires courage. Mert's story isn't unique. Across the country, children with disabilities face exclusion and bullying every day. But it's also a reminder that change is possible, that when we choose to see past differences and focus on common humanity, something beautiful happens. The playground where this story took place now has a special wheelchair-accessible section, funded by donations from parents who witnessed that transformation. But more importantly, it has children who have learned that inclusion isn't just about access, it's about acceptance. What would you have done if you had witnessed Mert being bullied? Have you ever seen a moment where someone stood up for another person against unfairness? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are about the smallest heroes who teach us the biggest lessons. Thank you for watching. Until next time, remember that kindness isn't just something we show, it's something we teach, and every child deserves to play.